guys. It's really because of the members like you for coming out that has gotten us to this point. So without further ado, I'm just going to let Alex take it away.
Hey everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Alex. I run business development and partnerships for a company called Walla. Anyone ever hear of something called Walla? Cool. We're a payments company. We're based in Des Moines, Iowa. It's not really usual for a startup. I run the New York office and the business side of the API platform. For those of you that don't know what the API is, my audience will. It's basically 10 years ago, two companies wanted to work with each other. They have to get their technical teams in the same room and make the technology. But now the company built an API and another company can plug into it. So I think the first company, or one of the first companies to really make the API sort of blow up was Facebook. So like Singo built on top of Facebook's API games. And if you go to a website, you want to buy something, you want to log into a website like Pinterest, you go and you log into Facebook. But anyway, so I'm moderating this panel. We have some pretty awesome people on the panel. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And I have a bunch of questions to ask them. But to be perfectly honest, like there's, you can just call out if you have a question or if you want to interrupt us or anything. I think everyone's comfortable in answering anything. We'll go from Scott and we'll move on. Introduce yourself. What's your name? What do you do? Where you work? But not too much. We'll get into the deeper. Cool.
Hey guys, I'm Scott. Trying to figure out what to do with this bottle of water right now because the floor is really far away and I know I don't want it frequently, so kind of in a conundrum. I do biz dev at a company called Single Platform. Do you want me to tell them in 30 seconds? Okay, that's it.
I'm Nick Amronski. I head up product at a company called OpenFin.
Your mic's down.
There we go. My name is Kate Hewitt, and I work at Howaboutview.com. I'm based in Dumbo, and I oversee all of our advertising, our email marketing, and basically our financial modeling.
Awesome. Okay, so guys, how did you get where you are? Give us your background on what you're doing before your current job, if anything, and sort of how you got there.
Sure. I guess for me, like I went to school, did not know what HTML was when I graduated. Went to our first sports agency to represent pro baseball players. Realized Jared McGuire is full of shit, and basically like had this kid that I went to school with who had just raised a bunch of money. Started a company, joined there. Then tried to start my own company, was flailing, and for me, like I just had done a really good job building relationships with a lot of the right people, and one of the investors of the company that I'm now a part of was on the softball team, and when I kind of admitted, I know you were on my team. When I told him that I was trying to look for my next thing, I'd been in the right place at the right time, just through building that relationship. That's kind of how I ended up in Single Platform.
By the way, if anyone likes playing softball outside down early, you know with the extras, so seriously.
So I'm not on that softball team, but the way I got started, I kind of went the traditional route. I got a corporate job. I worked at Citigroup in corporate banking for 4 years. I was down in Miami. I moved up to New York, and primarily to get involved with startups. I spent a year or so kind of getting involved in the startup community, meeting a lot of people, building relationships, coming to events like this. And then I ended up going to a random meetup in a loft in Soho and met founders of OpenFin, where I am today. They were just getting the company going. They were coming out of an acquisition from their previous company. And I basically sold myself on joining the team in the early days. And I've been there now for about 2 years.
So I also come from a banking background. I spent 5 years at Goldman, 3 in private wealth in Boston, and 2 doing bond deals here in New York. I basically got to my 5th year of Goldman and realized that I always wanted to be in tech, explored VC, explored business school, explored startups, actually went to business school for about a week, dropped out, came back, interned for free at a travel startup based in Soho, and ultimately found my way to Howaboutview.com as a community manager, and I've been there now 2.5 years, gone through multiple different versions of my role, and the company has grown from 7 people to almost 60.
Awesome. Also, just in terms of my background, I used to work at a company called Aviary. It's a photo editing software for mobile and web. And we used to be a business that was like a destination website, like Photoshop like tool. We pivoted the business. I wouldn't say it was like an 11th hour pivot, like it wasn't like OMG pop and we were about to like, shut the doors. But it was more of like we had like 6 months left to prove out we could build a business. We went from 0 users to 6 million users in like probably 9 months. And then since I've left about 1.5 years ago, they're now doing 50 million monthly active users. They power everyone from Flickr, PhotoBucket, Twitter, Walgreens, and a lot of those deals I did. And I moved over to Walla about 1 year and 3 months ago to focus on building out the API platform. So it really is just a product integration. So what I did at Aviary was focusing on getting our photo editor to third parties, to giving them to Flickr, giving them to PhotoBucket, making it really easy for them to plug it in. Doing the same thing at Walla, just with payments. So we're trying to build a new Visa, a new MasterCard, trying to get companies to integrate with Walla as another option for checkout. I've been there for like a year. So going back to the panel, go through your day. What do? You know, what skills do you have that allow you to do what you do, or what have you learned? Just go through like your day and sort of what you. Maybe not every day is the same, but like in general, what's your role? What do you do at your job? You want to go backwards?
Well, today was a blur, so this is a hard question to answer right now. I would say, so I now manage a team of 4 people, so a good part, I'm gonna go for maybe. So I would say a good chunk of my time is checking in with my team, both in aggregate, how much money are we spending, how are we doing performance-wise at all of our ads, what changes do we need to make, what do we need to be thinking about this week, this month, what do we need to be doing to position ourselves to be the smartest people in acquisition, 3 months from now. And then, each individual person, what's your workflow like, what are you thinking about, what's blocking you from doing your job well. So that's a good chunk of time each week. I spend a lot of time with depending on what's going on, with our co-founders around doing financial modeling. So preparing for board meetings, preparing for other investor meetings, modeling out different scenarios to understand what are the big bets that we want to take from where do we put our cash in order to get the best possible results for our business. And then a lot of time also coordinating with the product team around what are the things that the advertising and email marketing parts of the business need from a product perspective to increase our efficiency. And then a good amount of time working on email as well, thinking about what's the flow that our users are going through. When they sign up, are we sending the right messages at the right time to people throughout the entire course of their time on our site?
A follow-up to that is anything at Goldman help you, like any skills that you need to help you now with what you're doing at that way?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is being, Goldman is a real thing about like teamwork, and it sounds like marketing BS, but it's actually true. So I would say, Goldman really forced me to learn how to work well on the team, and that is an absolutely critical skill that I would say I brought. Excel, obviously, the way that I got into working on our paid advertising is basically that I was the only person in our 7-person company who knew how to use Excel in any sort of, quick and meaningful way. And so they were like, here, you take the financial model. And so I started working on that and then connected to that. Advertising is all about how quickly you earn back the money that you're spending. And so working on the model transitioned very naturally into working on advertising and building out all of the dashboards and analytics in a sort of V1 way initially to understand how our ads are performing. I'd say those are probably the two biggest.
Awesome. Nick?
Yeah, so I'm kind of in more of a generalist role. How many people here are kind of interested in product, right? Product role, a product-based role. Yeah, so, I'm in more of a generalist role, so I'm helping manage product. I'm running all of our marketing efforts, I'm running our community efforts, working on biz dev as well as supporting sales. So my role day to day is first dealing with customer requests. We've implemented a policy around providing the best customer service in the financial industry, which is the industry we sell to. And that's kind of my first thing I do every day is getting back to customers, getting back to them with questions that they had. And then, we're constantly iterating on the product, adding new features. So I will spend most of my time every day working with our developers and our designers on implementing the features that are kind of in our product roadmap. I then spend a lot of time out pitching. So we launched that in December, and we're now doing a full sales pitch. So I'm actually out of the office quite a lot with our CEO and CTO pitching the product to prospective customers. So that's kind of where I spend most of my time. In terms of my role at Citi, I would say the same thing. I think teamwork, and I also just thinking about product strategy and just thinking about strategy in general. I think corporate jobs do a very good job of getting you to think that way. I think another piece of it is more the analytical side, because you'll find a lot of startups don't really have that piece. The ability to put together an Excel model and really do a deep dive in analytics is important.
Can I actually caveat the analytics thing for 1 second though? So one thing about the analytics piece that you bring from finance, generally speaking, is that often it's like the V1 of analytics, and then later, so at Howaboutview, for example, because we hit 40 people, we brought in a data scientist who has now taken our analytics way beyond where I could have taken them. He has like a background in statistics and econometrics, like really has just a fundamentally different way of thinking about data that I don't think most organizations need until later on, but that analytics piece is still very critical in the early stage, and even in the later stage for stuff that isn't really as critical to have that really deep dive into the data science.
Cool. So I'm actually going to tell you just real quick what our company actually does, because it'll actually give you a little bit of context of what I do. So today, you're a restaurant, you're listed on hundreds of sites and applications like Google Places, Yelp, Foursquare, Urban Spoon. Basically, what we let you do is input your information, like your menu, photos, hours, name, address, and phone number. Then we distribute out to all those sites and apps in real time. And every time you make a change on your menu, let's say the steak, you want to change it from $25 to $23, you make it in our portal, it changes everywhere instantly. So what I do is partnerships with all of those sites and apps so that is possible. And so basically, I spend my day on the phone and emailing and meeting with people, trying to convince them that taking our data and having that connection through an API is a good idea. So I'm pretty much pitching and doing a lot of soft stuff to get people to partner with us and ultimately allow our salespeople to have a really robust, awesome product to sell. And that's the idea of business development is essentially to drive growth for your company. So we make our product my team makes our product much better so that our salespeople can sell it more. Another thing I do is manage all channel partnerships. Basically what that means is, my company has this product, there's other companies out there that also have similar customers that would benefit from using our product. I basically first am going out and identifying these partners, trying to convince them that our product is a great fit for their customers and that selling our product or remarketing our product is a great idea for their business objectives. And then once I actually do the deal, I manage the entire cycle. So everything from what's the revenue split going to be, how is this going to launch, who's going to manage billing, who's going to manage customer service. There's a bazillion different things that go into a channel partnership. So I actually manage that deal after the fact to make sure that it's successful.
Awesome.
So, what do you guys do, outside of your job that sort of help you grow in your tech scene? Do you teach classes? Do you write a blog? Do you play softball? Like, what else do you do outside of your actual daily job that sort of that helps you guys in the community?
Sure. So I do blog. I'd say when I was getting started out, I literally made it a goal to buy somebody coffee or lunch every single day that I didn't know in the tech scene. And that's honestly how I got my job. That's what everybody should be doing that's looking to break into tech. It's basically just convincing people to get together with you and buy up shit so that they can apply. And so I started out doing a ton of that. And then I thought I wanted to be a VC. Some VC told me that I needed to have a digital presence, I needed to start a blog. So I started a blog, and now I write a lot actually. And it's been a really awesome tool to grow my personal brand, connect with a lot of really awesome people in a scalable way. Because if you can't like go out and to an event every single night, like, you can only meet so many people. But if you create a piece of content, you're able to, that resonates with a lot of people, you're able to connect with people at scale. It's been awesome. So I do that. I teach a couple online courses. I'm actually teaching a course on breaking into business development. So those are all been really awesome things to kind of grow a personal brand, meet more awesome people in tech, and it's been really rewarding.
Yeah, a few things I did early on that's helpful is I started organizing events and getting involved in growing communities. You get to meet a ton of people, you build credibility in that space. So while I was at City Group, I founded an enterprise tech meetup. We now have about 1,300 members. We do monthly events and panels around enterprise technology. I help run New York City Startup Weekend as well. There's actually going to be one this weekend. So if you guys are looking to break in, you should be going to events like that. It's going to be at Alley NYC. And I also help run something new that I kicked off recently called the FinTech Hackathon. Given that I work in the financial industry on the technology side, it's a great event for community building, brand building. So I think, additionally, coming to events like this is great, but I think if there's an area that you're extremely passionate about, if you can build credibility in that area and show that you have an interest, and you can bring a community together, I think that's very valuable as well. And actually did help me land my job at OpenFit. And it's opened a lot of doors professionally. So I think getting involved in that level is great. And then, yeah, you need to have an online presence. If people Google you and you want to work at a startup and they don't find anything about you, you don't have a Twitter handle, you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you don't have anything, that's a problem. So little things like that I think are very important. And I also try to blog. I don't know how Alex and Scott blog so much, but I try to blog as much as you guys do. But I write a blog as well on product and design. So I think you just got to show passion and interest for something and just throw everything at it. Because people really appreciate that. And you need to have an opinion. So that's my
So I'm going to pick up what Nick said. You should definitely have a LinkedIn profile, but you should also make sure that anybody who knows nothing at all about what you're doing can read it. Your grandmother should be able to look at your LinkedIn profile and understand exactly what you've done. Particularly, it depends a little bit on where you're coming from, but a lot of times, like, people's LinkedIn profiles are really full of jargon from what they did before tech. And if someone Googles you and they can't understand what you've done, you've really lost an opportunity for that person to get really excited about you. So I'd say you definitely want to have a social media profile, but you also want to make really sure that it is actually saying what you want it to say. That's one thing. These guys talked a lot about blogging. I blog probably less enthusiastically than anyone here, but I do share a ton of content through my Tumblr and through Twitter that I think, even though I'm not necessarily adding a lot of commentary myself, still demonstrate a lot of interest in the space. I try to surface stuff that maybe is not already really widely distributed, and I've been doing that since I started trying to break into tech, and I do think that really helps. I think Nick is right in terms of going to smaller events. I think the the more I've hired like 50 people. There are a lot of startup founders that are literally, starting to hire their first employee, and they're like, I have no idea how to hire. Like, I've only ever worked for myself. I've never hired anyone. You probably have skills that you're not even really aware of, and teaching those in the startup community is actually really,
Yeah, definitely. Not a great Excel system. I feel that. Okay, so when someone comes to you and they ask you, how do I break into New York Tech scene? I get this a lot. I know I'm sure Scott gets a lot. I don't know how much you guys get it. I'm sure you get it from friends. Like, what's the formula that you tell them how to break in? I know what I tell people when they come to me. No, share that at the end. You guys got it? But no, I know what I say when people ask me how to break in. But like, what would be, if someone comes to me and say, what's the formula? Like, how do I do it? And they're not looking for shortcuts. They're just like, I'm gonna put the work in. Like, what do I need to do to actually break in? What's your response?
Sure, I'm going to frame this as there's two problems. The first is, as a non-technical person that's applying for jobs, there's a signal to noise problem. I have friends who have tech companies who put out an entry-level BD role, and within the first 3 days, they get 300 applications. There's just no way whoever's hiring can look at all those applications. So what do? They use their personal network and the people that get recommended to them as a proxy for who to look at first. And this is actually why this mass influx signal noise problem is actually why a lot of the best BD jobs never even get posted, because people just don't want to deal with it. They only want to deal with personal recommendations from their network, from people they trust. So how to alleviate that problem, I basically tell people to network their ass off and go out and just make your sole goal to make people who are in a position to help you out in some way make their lives better, add a ton of value to their lives, and essentially take advantage of what's called the law of reciprocity, where you do something nice for somebody else, they feel they're more likely to reciprocate. They feel like they need to reciprocate. So if you spend a ton of time providing them spike feedback on their site, make a valuable introduction, send them articles that they think are interesting, that they might be interested in, take their puppy for a walk, whatever it is, give them something valuable that makes them want to do something nice for you. The second thing is that basically, if you have no experience, you're a risk, right? People perceive you as a risk for this person can't potentially do their job effectively, and also a risk that I might have to micromanage you. So what I tell people to do is create a project. Create some type of project that shows that you can basically execute and you have initiative and you can manage something on your own. So, example projects just are all the things that we talked about that people can create as extracurricular activities. A project can be a meetup, a project can be a breakfast, a project can be a blog, it can be a physical product, it can be a newsletter, it can be a charity event, it can just be something that you created from scratch that you can point to and say, look, I'm a self-starter, I have initiative, look at this thing that I created. So those are creating a project, networking a ton with people that have the potential to help you out. Are the two things that I tell people.
Yeah, so the one thing I try to get people to do is really hone down on what companies they're interested in, because I think that kind of changes the strategy completely. I wrote, just to follow up on Scott's thing, I wrote a really popular blog post about never applying for a job. As Scott was saying, you need to get a direct introduction to people, because there's millions of people applying for the same job. Some have more experience, some have less, but if you can get an introduction, a warm introduction, that helps immensely. And I also think framing the company that you're going after is very important. I get a lot of people come to me and say, hey, I just want to get into startups, and it's like, I can't really do anything because I don't know what they want to do. So I think, spending time researching the companies is very important. Spending time researching why you want to work with those companies is important. And a lot of things I see is when people apply or they interview or they go after a job, they actually don't use the product. And that's a major problem. You should be a user, and you should have opinions and feedback on what's wrong with the product. I've interviewed people, and I've had friends who've gone to interviews where they literally show up and they don't even know what the company does, or they don't really know what the product does, and it's an iPhone app, and they never used it, and I just think, you know, it's very easy for people to just be like, I want to work in startups. It's a lot of work, and you need to put that work in and show that you've done that work. Put together a presentation on, you know, what they can improve on the process or on their website or on their product, and just really show them that you have a vested interest in improving what they're doing, and you're passionate about what they're doing. And then, you know, as I mentioned earlier, just I think getting involved and building a very strong brand in the niche that you want to be involved in, whether it's business development or product, or acquisition and marketing, being a kind of thought leader in that space is very, very important.
I would say like the single, like the one-liner, I guess, is you basically want to make it as easy as possible for the person that you're asking to do something for you to say yes. And there's a whole variety of ways that you can do that. I think both of these guys touched on critical points. One is really take a step back and think about, what do I actually want? If you think you want to work in business development, you know, for a B2C company, read like 25 business development jobs, get a sense of like, what is this person actually doing, and make sure that you have experience that reflects that. And when you reach out, whether it's cold or through a warm introduction, you want to make sure that it's super, super clear that you've actually read their job description, that you've read every interview that the founder of that company has ever had in any tech publication, whether it has like 2,000 page views or 200,000 page views. You basically need to prove that you've done your research. I would say the networking piece is big, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in person. One example, I interacted with Howaboutview via Twitter for probably 6 months before I met anyone from the company. But when I walked in for my interview, their community manager recognized me from my Twitter account. She was like, oh, you're QE. I've been wanting to reach out to you, but I was like wondering what your deal was. You sent us like all of these articles and tweeted at us and like, you know, written like thoughtful product feedback and, you know, posted it. So I'd say don't underestimate the power of a lot of these little things over time also.
You know, to what Scott said, it's funny because my job at Aviary and my job at Walla, there was never a job posting. And one of the dirty secrets about startups is that all the investors hold the keys to the job. So when a company takes investment, because those are the type of startups, unless you're starting your own company, you want to go to a company that has funding. You go to a company that doesn't have funding, you're going to just waste your time unless they're about to secure funding. And it's just not worth it. You might as well just start your own company at the same risk. So when a company, when a VC fund invests, or when a VC fund invests in a startup, they ask for something called the use of funds. The use of funds is how you're going to spend the money that we're about to give you. In that use of funds, it tells exactly who you're going to hire with these funds. So it's like 4 engineers and a business person and a support person and a designer. They know when that business person is supposed to come. So a few months before that even happens, you start using their network and seeing who might be the right person for that. You know, I reached out to one Quickman from Spark Capital right after they made the investment in Aviary, and he just introduced me to the founders. There's no job posting, and I got the job a week later. Dwala just raised money from Union Square Ventures and Thrive Capital, and Josh and Chris from Thrive Capital reached out to me after they closed the round and said, hey, they're going to be looking for a business development person to run their API platform. You want to meet that CEO? And I met him, and they offered me the job. There was never a job posting. So, you know, Scott's 100% right, where the best jobs are never listed. So my answer to when people come to me on how to get a job, how to like break into the startup world, it's really 3 steps. And actually, I think people touched upon it a little, but there's 3 distinct steps. The first is research. So you need to research. If you don't have like a specific passion, you need to research all the industries that are out there. There's payments, there's photo, there's video, there's dating, there's social, there's fintech, there's like tons, there's education, healthcare. I mean, I literally could go on and on. If you say you want to work at startups, it doesn't mean anything. You say, oh, I want to work at an education startup. Okay, so once you do research on what verticals are out there, the next step is that you need to figure out, okay, I've focused on 3 different verticals that are important to me. Who are the 5 to 10 companies that are really interesting in that area? Or maybe even break it down even closer, like
who in New York, if you want to stay here, who in San Francisco are those like 5 to 10 companies that are going to do big things in the next few years, that are going to have high growth? Once you've done that, then you go even deeper and you say, okay, who are the key employees there or founders there that I want to work with or work for? Once you've done that, you've done the research, and you should know like a little bit of what you want to do. The next step is doing reading. So every single industry has their own reading, required reading, let's call it. Tech, you got to read, TechCrunch, you got to read, Mark Schuster, you got to read Fred Wilson, you got to read everything Mark Andreessen ever wrote, Canada Daily, Business Insider. I mean, there's a lot of different things. If you want to do entertainment, you can read Deadline, you read Variety. If you want to do, real estate, you read, I don't know if you read real estate, but read something. Every industry has their own like, what is that? Yeah, I don't know, I thought you were saying something real estate. So every industry has their own literature. So it's not only reading like the professional writers, but also the insiders who write. So once you do the research, then you do the reading, then you have enough to go on, and you can start networking. Because I've seen this a lot where people start networking and they don't really know anything yet. So they don't really have a vehicle. They don't have anything. They're like, yeah, I want to do startups. It's like, okay, let's meet you. Let's do that. Like, you want to sort of have a vehicle. You want to be like, I'm Alex, I work right now at like MTV Networks, and I really want to work at an entertainment startup, and I'm really excited about these 3 startups. And then it lets you at least have a chance. So once you've done those 3 steps, if you do that, after a while, you'll break in, I promise you. If you put enough time into the research, the reading, and then the networking, and each industry has their own events. It doesn't need to be like an event like this where you'll meet people. If you're in the printing industry, there's a conference that you can go to. Every industry has their own events and conferences. So that's what I recommend people doing, is the research, reading, and the networking. By the time you get to networking, you know enough to sort of break in.
I just wanted to interject one thing. You mentioned investors are the keys to the kingdom. I actually think, depending on the size of the company and the stage, like I think once you get past the Series A, like I would rather have someone come to me, like have done the work. Like if someone was applying for a job on my team, I'd be pumped if they like went through LinkedIn, figured out who I was, and wrote me specifically, and they're like, hey, I'm really excited about advertising.
Oh, I mean,
At
you want
Howaboutview,
those,
as opposed to
those
like,
employees are going to be better, meaning like those, not better, but those employees that they've done the research and stuff. I'm talking about like the investors who know. So like if you're close enough to them, or if you start networking with investors, then if you know people at First Round Capital, RRE, Union Square, you can talk to one of the people that are looking for a BD job. They're like, oh, we have like 4 openings in our portfolio, and then they're like, okay. Then it's like, this is like, I didn't even know that aviary board of all before I joined. To be perfectly honest, like I had no background, and then the founders did have no anything, and that's the worst thing you can do. Like seriously, it's like I'm teaching you from my mistakes. Even though I ended up getting the jobs, like I honestly, I had to do all account before I met that, but like I didn't really know anything. I didn't know anything about payments. But I think he liked that I didn't know anything about payments, because my job wasn't doing anything about payments or like partnership. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like doing the research, definitely like those are smarter than myself. Like those type of employees are probably better. But yeah, you had a question?
You kind of just touched upon it, but further along, did you already have a relationship with this VC? Because I'm thinking that VCs are busy with all type of inquiries, that relationship to strike up will be difficult. And also, how candid are you about reaching out and saying, I'm looking for another position to a VC, and just kind of hoping that they invested in a company that needs one?
So personally, it took a long time to build relationships with a bunch of different VCs. When I was in college, I started a company with 2 friends, and we went around and we raised a little bit of money. It ended up failing miserably, but I met the whole sort of New York tech VC space. So I sort of had like, and then I ended up working for a startup, and then when that startup wasn't doing so well, that's when I reached out to Mo from Spark, because I knew him already, but I definitely didn't have that network. And one of the things I actually did when I was at Aviary was that one of my, like I had a list of goals I wanted to do before like I felt like I was, like my time at Aviary was over. One of them was like learn how to launch a product, learn how to get press, learn how to raise money. One of them was try to meet every single investor that is investors in Aviary and also investors in all other companies. So one of my goals was to actually like meet as many as I can. So I ended up having a network in the VC space. But it's, I mean, the VC part is a little tricky because you can't just do that. You can't just reach out to them. They're not going to respond to you. But at the same time, I mean, at the same time, like that's the best way to do it. But they're not going to respond to it. Like we just hired a head of product, and it came from we raised around from Andreessen Horowitz, and Andreessen like they literally brought us the head of product. He was at another portfolio company of theirs that they just exited. So we like it just the job was posted, but we never. I mean, we interviewed people, but it came from our investors. I would say that like. That happens a lot more than people would like to admit.
So one thing on the investor side, I agree with Alex. It takes time to build relationships with them. I think it's really important to do that. Not just network with people in the startup community, but network with the VCs. One thing that helps, and again, not everybody can do this, but if you organize events, stuff like this, panel events, or kind of vertical events around a specific vertical in startups, invite VCs to be on panels. They love to do that. They love the exposure. They love talking about what they do. They love to give advice, and it's a great way for yourself and even people who come to your event to start building those relationships. And that's one way, through organizing the various events I do, I've met and built really great relationships with a lot of VCs here in New York. So that's just one piece of advice.
I would also say that the junior people at VCs tend to be like, they're trying to improve themselves, and one of the ways that they can improve it, like one of the core functions of VC is, as Alex said, to like make sure that their portfolio companies get staffed with the right people. And so if you reach out thoughtfully to junior level VCs and like really prove your worth with them, they'll be more excited to refer you up to their senior people and onto their portfolio companies also. It's slightly easier in, I think.
Don't ever treat junior VCs badly as well. Don't ever do that because that will ruin your career and ruin your relationship.
A lot of founders treat junior VCs really poorly, and because they just don't want to waste their time. But I mean, they're not looking for jobs.
I was just gonna say, I personally think you should start out your networking journey not with VCs, with people that you know or have a common bond with. Because quite frankly, it's like these people literally have 8 to 10 meetings today of people trying to start companies. Like some guy who's unhappy at his job, like isn't going to be high priority for them. And then when you go to them, you're really not going to have a lot of momentum to connect, be it in the form of connections, events, whatever it is that hold capital in his eyes to really provide value. So like, I think like my personal opinion is the optimal strategy is to like whether it's people that went to your college or your friends or whoever it is, like try to start and like get momentum and have those initial conversations and initial networking with people you know. And then what you do is you essentially leverage those to have more and more conversations. So all of a sudden you know like 20 different people in tech. When you have a meeting, maybe with a VC or somebody, all of a sudden you bring something to the table. You have all these connections, right? And then you can actually, they bring up something where you might be able to help them out. You now have something you can bring to the table. The second thing is that you can do is like a lot of VCs, a lot of these people have blogs or on Twitter. Massage their egos on their blog or their Twitter. I'm telling you, it works. Like people, when you do that, when you're continually thoughtful over and over and over again, they feel like you owe you something, so they take a meeting with you, even though they might not necessarily want to take a meeting with you, in terms of like pure business objectives. So like those are, I mean, that's just like a classic, the working online in terms of Twitter and blogging, or blog commenting, is just like a classic like networking strategy to get an in-person meeting when you don't necessarily have like a ton of capital to bring to the table.
I would say the last thing on VCs would be that the best way, it's the hardest way, but the best way to get a VC to really like you and to break in with a lot of other VCs is to send them a deal that they end up investing in making money. And it's the hardest thing to do because you have to know what they like, you have to know, find a good company to do that. I would say one of the earliest things I did is I sourced the deal. Like, once you source a deal in the New York tech scene, or in any tech scene, that's the quickest way to get like people to respond to you. And the
deal actually is a company called Neverwhere. They're here. I met John. He's the founder. Basement. He happened to be dating this actually goes to what Scott said. Happened to be dating a girl I went to elementary school with. And I bumped into him. And he's like, yeah, I'm starting an education company. And we're like, oh, cool, let's sit down. We sat down. And it's really cool. And I introduced him to a few different people. And he ended up going out and raising like $1 million from some of the best VCs in New York and even San Francisco. And then a lot of people wanted me to send them deals after that. So like making sure that and the way you do that is you have to like have your ear on the ground, meet a lot of companies, and even that crazy person who's saying they want to put balloons over Africa because they want to give them internet. Like listen to that person. It's maybe a crazy idea. I mean, people do that as a joke, but like if you hear enough even Ben, Dwala CEO. People tell me like 5 years ago he was running around, people thought he was the craziest person in the world, trying to build a new payment network from scratch, trying to go after MasterCard and Visa. I mean, 5 years later, he's raised $22 million from the best VCs on the West and East Coast. Things change. So having an ear on the ground, finding the best deals, and if a VC really likes that type of deal, there's no better way to get on their good side.
Yeah, just could you elaborate on exactly the definition of what you mean by sourcing deals? Are you literally just email introing the two parties and letting them take it from there? Is that
yeah? I mean, so it's
deal?
like so I met John. We hung out, and then I was like, okay, let me see if any of my friends who are working in like at VC or any investors are interested. So I emailed them and I say, hey, there's an interesting company dash the name. And it's like, hey, I just caught up with my friend John. We're on a really cool company. He's going out for a series, his seed round, and he's got some traction. He's working with X, Y, and Z. Do you want to meet him? I think it's really promising. No harm if you don't want to take the intro, but if you want to take it, and then connecting them. You don't need to walk him in and close the deal for him, but people appreciate, especially founders, they appreciate that first introduction that helps them sort of get to the next thing, and they remember you, and they recommend you to their investors once they close around. They're like, yeah, Alex is a great guy. He really helped me early on. Nobody really gave me a chance. Blah blah blah. So it's more like the early on sourcing.
But it's just that one email and then it's over.
I mean, yeah, you follow up and make sure everyone's happy. You see, you want if there's miscommunication, you try to jump in, but that. I mean, yeah.
Cool. I guess my point is, don't underestimate the value of one email, right?
Yeah, don't blast it off without the person's permission.
Cool.
Ask them for that. Ask them if they're okay with taking the introduction, because that's the worst thing you can do.
Right.
It's
right.
just like,
Waste
so
of
cool
time.
comment, that was awesome video. Here's the intro, CC the guy, great. They'll never take your emails or calls. It's like you just reply to my inbox. You don't respect my time and whatever.
Cool. Thank you.
Can you touch a bit on compensation? I think this is jumping the gun, but in the corporate world, it's pretty easy to kind of benchmark an offer versus other offers. And in the startup world, obviously you want to find the company and the founders, but how can you, especially on the business development and sales side, ensure that you're getting a fair package, I guess?
I'll try to tackle this. So, you don't really join startups to make money, right, from your salary. Down the road, if the company's bigger, you do, but if you're joining a startup, I think the biggest thing is, yes, there's no data out there, but there are things you can do. I mean, network with people and talk to other people in that position and kind of get a sense of where the market is. There's things like Glassdoor.com, which is actually starting to get more and more startups on there. That basically just provides people who work at these companies, they post, salaries. So you can get a general sense of what it is. But, I wouldn't really let a job fall over on salary if it's a startup that you're extremely interested in. Because as the company, if you can get in early enough and you can get enough equity and you can build a really strong position.
When I said comp, I was thinking more along those lines. So
Equity?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the equity thing you need to be tough with. The founders don't want to give out a ton of equity to everybody, right? Because they already give enough to VCs and investors, and they don't want every single employee owning a huge piece of the company. I think you need to do research and find out if they've structured it the right way. What I think you want to see is, have the founders set aside a pool of equity for employees only. I think you need to ask the right questions about dilution and what's going to happen in future rounds and are you going to get topped up. But I think you do need to push for it, right? Because you're joining a company, you're trying to help them build it, you're all working towards that same goal. And you just need to push for as much as you can get. The founders will either say yes or no, but I think there's room there for you to really show them the value you're going to add and why you're demanding that equity. I could be wrong on these numbers, Alex might know more, but generally if you're coming in early stage and you're like, I don't know, head of biz dev or you're kind of in a seniorish role, you generally get early employees get 1 to 5% in that kind of range. I wouldn't come in and say, hey, I want 10%. It's kind of, unless you're a complete badass and you've done a lot of stuff before. But that's kind of how I look at it.
The best post that I've done is Morgan Nissen, who's a recruiter primarily on the dev side. He basically said Disco has a blog post about this that has 5 different resources. He mentioned Glassdoor. Quora actually has some, depending on the role and the level of the company. It can be really detailed or it can be wide print is not helpful. And then actually Angel List can be helpful, again, depending on the role and the stage.
I don't. You probably have. I'm not blow up your spot. But you've been in a company, you know that has been acquired. So my personal opinion on equity is unless you're a founder, you're not really making anything. So perfectly honest, go to the company, get enough money to live, get a decent package, but don't expect to strike gold on that, even if you join the hot. There's only so few companies that are $1 billion+ companies. And if you're top first 50 employees for a $1 billion+ company, you'll make something. Maybe you'll make $1 million or more, but it's not it's not FU money. You're not going to an island. I'm saying you have to understand that founders and senior executives, C-level executives, are the only ones who really cash out on any sort of exit scenario. And the goal is to go to a company with enough money to live, learn all the skills you need to learn, and then go start your own company. And I don't know, John, this is being recorded, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Pause it.
I can turn it off.
Take it off the record.
We'll pause it.
No. Let's just take it.
I totally agree with Alex. You're not going to make a lot of money unless you start a company, or you're a super badass that comes in as a COO or something like that. So quite frankly, even if you convince somebody to give you 1% and that company raises,
And you're not getting 1%
Right.
at anything after Series A.
Right.
Unless you're a COO or higher.
and you have 15 years of startup experience. So you got 1%. That company raises 3 rounds of funding, so that's actually 0.2%. That vests over 4 years. You sell for $100 million, you make 40 grand. Seriously, you should be optimizing for learning. And compensation should just be viewed as a vehicle to live comfortably. Equity is only important, at least for me, at this point in my career, it's just start a company or get paid.
Before I take questions, my old boss, who was the COO of Aviary, used to be a chief of staff at Microsoft. Now he's the senior vice president of DataWorks. He always said your 20s and 30s are for learning and your 40s are for earning. And that's I don't know why, maybe it was 20s are for learning, 30s are for earning or something. But the whole idea is that just the straight numbers, I joined Walla. If we're a $1 billion company, I might make, I might make decent buck. I might make, $1 million or $2 million. But the same, and that's me being employee number 18, 19, 20. Now, I go start a company and I raise $1 million at a, $5, $6 million valuation. I've already made the same amount of paper money, but I've already made the same amount. Let's say we don't even make it and we sell for, meaning we don't hit our hyper growth to raise VC money and we get acquired by Google or Facebook for
$15 million bucks. I mean, that's like day and night compared to what you make for working at a high growth company. So just don't expect, like, you should go in to learn and then, you know, go off and do your thing. Not say like use the company, suck their resources and look like do your best job possible, like do the best job you can and make sure that you add so much value to the company. But in the back of your mind, know that like you're not going to be cashing out, you're not going to go sit on the beach for the next years of your life. You're going to need to go do it yourself after if you really want to like not do anything.
And you'll turn founders off if you go to them like, oh, I have that equity, that's all I care about. They will never hire you. I mean, you need to be there because you want to be there and you want to build the company.
But also at the same time, if you have two offers, that's one like they're giving you salary X with like a certain amount of equity, and they give you salary, you know, X minus 5K with more equity. They want you to take more equity because they want you to know that you're like vested in the company. We're doing questions now? Okay.
Yeah, just, what is your guys' next step? I mean, just kind of following up on this, do you find that people in kind of non-tech roles have this itch to start their own company, and you know, is that kind of the next step or role for you guys? Maybe we should turn the camera off.
No, I mean, that actually was the next thing. Well, I had two more questions to bring up. One was like, do you guys have mentors? And then the next one was like, long term, where do you want to be? So we can go through that, those two.
I definitely have a mentor, and I think that that's probably the most valuable thing that you can find in your next job, especially for a startup. And the reason is because I guess just like in my personal experience, I tried to start a company before I had a really badass mentor, and I learned a shitload, but I just learned at a very slow rate, right? Because I was trying to figure out every single thing on my own. When I had a mentor, somebody who was excellent at something to calibrate with, I learned at such an accelerating rate, and also I wasn't depressed as shit because I was actually like figuring out, you know, seeing something done well and being able to model it myself. And it's like, I always tell people, it's like, you can go, if you want to figure out your golf swing, your tennis swing, you can go and hit balls all day until your hands bleed, or you can take a 1 hour lesson with a coach and immediately fix your swing. And that's kind of how I see the whole idea of like, you know, eating your humble pie, starting off in a junior role and working for a badass is like an excellent way to get like the most amount of value for your time. And my mentor right now is a guy by the name of Kenny Herman, who's you know, one of the guys that helped start our company and is our executive vice president of business development.
Yeah, you have to have mentors. I think it's important to have a mentor inside your company and outside your company. So, you know, our CEO is one of my mentors, and then I actually have a few outside of OpenFin who I'm constantly talking to, getting feedback from, getting advice from. I think it's absolutely critical because, you know, everybody's in the same position, right? Everyone who works at a startup, they all eventually go through the same thing. They've been in situations you've been in. So I think being able to bounce ideas and getting advice from those people is really, really important. And then also, if you're going through hard times, sometimes it just makes you feel better in general because they've been through it or they're going through it, and you can empathize with them. So I think, you know, I think it's really, really important to have that. And I think having a mentor inside and outside of your area of expertise is important too, just to get some diverse feedback.
So I would say one of the sort of like guidelines that I've lived my professional life by is that I don't want to work for anyone who I would also regard as a mentor. So I would say at this point, my two like closest mentors are my existing boss, and one of the CEOs of Howaboutview, and actually my former boss at Goldman, who even though she spent her entire life, you know, in finance, a completely different sector, far more related to one of the most valuable people in my life for professional, and actually often like that line between professional and personal advice as well.
And then the last question before we open up to everybody for questions. You know, long term, you know, where do you want to be? And you know, this is a question. I mean, you know, what do you want to be a product lifer? Do you want to be a BD lifer? Do you want to be an acquisition lifer? Or do you want to be a founder? Do you want to do, you know, do you want to be an investor? Do you want to be, I mean, for me, I always see it as like three things. It can either be an business development, you know, I could be like urban, I could go to each company, bringing like my personal expertise in business development and APIs, and try to help scale, you know, try to go to early enough company where I can make a big enough dent and actually make a difference. I can go into VC. A lot of people have moved over to VC after they get acquired or whatever, or I could be a founder. That's probably the most challenging one, but it's also the most rewarding one. So like, you know, long term, you know, what do you want to do?
Yeah. Of those three, definitely founder.
Yeah, I actually have no idea. I think short term, I need to keep getting more experience. But I think, yeah, long term, you know, given what I've seen by working at an early stage company and what I've just seen around in tech in general, I would love to be a founder in the future, as long as I have a great idea.
Top question for me. I don't really see myself as an acquisition lifer, but in my, I guess, the things that I'm really passionate about are building a business and learning. And I think as long as I'm doing either of those two things, I'm going to be happy. I'm not wedded specifically to the idea of being a founder. I think working for a really inspiring founder is just, I can't speak from experience, but working for an incredible founder is unbelievably inspiring in many, many ways. And so I can happily see myself doing that for a long period of time.
Cool. First of all, before we open it up, thank you, analysts, for being awesome, being very open with your answers. Let's give them a round of applause. All right, so lay it on us. What kind of questions do you guys have?
What's your position on the business school in terms of where you get into a startup or to the entrepreneurship side?
You want me to take this since I went?
You went for a day?
Yeah, I went for like 10 days. So I think people always say this about
Can you repeat the
business
Can
question?
you repeat the question?
school. Oh, sorry. The question was, what do you think about business school and the way to get into startups? I think the answer is, as with all decisions about business school, that it's deeply personal. I think in New York, there's an amazing set of founders, Woody Parker and Birchbox sitting too. Learned that, and there's just a bunch that have come out of HBS and Wharton in particular. And for those founders, it was really, you know, it seems like it was a really formative experience. On the flip side of that, I think it depends a little bit on how deep you are in your career. I was 5 years out of school by the time I matriculated. And it was like, I've already put off doing this thing that I'm really passionate about doing for 5 years already. And I'm really going to wait another 2 years. And it just, at that point for me, like, it didn't make sense. And so, left, came back to New York, and tried to just go direct. So it was also, it was also different for me, I think, also because Goldman in particular has a policy of promoting internally, and so I knew also that if the startup thing didn't work out, or if I hated it or like totally misconceived it, that I could still go back to what I had done before without needing to go back to business school. So I think it's different if you're trying to make a wholesale shift and you don't think depending on where you think you might end up if the startup thing doesn't end up being a good fit.
Personally, for me, there's two parts to it. One is like, I can't imagine taking myself out of the game for 2 years. You know what I mean? There's a part of me that like is not part of the scene. I think like one thing about business school is like there's the network that you got there. I know that like there are, I know like Columbia, I know Harvard, I know like Stanford. They have like a really good like network. That I know like in Princeton, you know, you can email any. I know Princeton emails like anyone can be like graduated Princeton.
He does.
So like. So the network is probably worth it. You know, some people like it depends what you want to do. Like you'd say, like if you're a founder, you know, some people will even look down on you for doing it. If there are people who are like that, not everybody, but like it really depends on what you want to do. You know, maybe take 2 years to work on a business while you're in school, but then like why do you really need to like have more debt? You know what I mean? You already have enough problems to start a company.
So it's a personal, I mean, personally, I would recommend it.
Yeah, I guess you guys have already like touched on it in a number of ways, but just more directly, like, could you guys talk about like, what you believe to be like the optimal entry point at a company? You know, there's been a lot of especially founder versus join, and you guys have been in the game long enough to grab a pretty solid.
Definitely for business development, I think that the optimal point is when a company, and usually when a company hires like their second BD hire or their junior hire, it means they have some traction and now they're scaling. And I think that's an excellent place to cut your teeth, right? When a company is scaling biz dev, that's an awesome place to go because you'll be able to actually get deal experience, right? And you actually have somewhat of a good product to go out and pitch, which will just make the experience a whole lot more enriching, right? On the contrary, I've seen people without any biz dev experience go and be like the first biz dev hire at a company that wasn't ready for biz dev, and they don't actually get any deals done. It's just like a year and a half of speculative conversations, and it's just like, yeah, dude, I've been there too, and it sucks. And it's like, you know, I think that like, you know, the best use of somebody's time if they're looking, at least on the biz dev side of things, is to go for a company that is scaling biz dev, that already has somebody senior with a ton of experience above you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best point, is like, senior person, like, find someone who knows what they're doing and learn from them. Like, I know Kenny really knows what he's doing, and like, you can see he's got learned so much that like, you know, he's learning, it's more about like learning what not to do. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's, half the battle is just like, there's someone who knows what mistakes you should avoid, and they tell you that before you really avoid them, or they let you experience those mistakes and then they tell you why you messed up. So yeah, like exactly, when they're scaling, when they're hiring the second BD person, and when you can work for someone who knows what they're doing, so you can just like soak all that in.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the flip side of that, right? I joined a company. I joined a few months after it was started. I think there's two sides to it. You can join a later stage company and learn a ton. And then you could also join, even though it's riskier, right? You could join an earlier stage company. You'll also learn a lot because you're basically there from the early days. You're helping with everything: product, marketing, fundraising, pitching, selling, biz dev. So you get a broad depth of experience, but obviously it's a much riskier and more stressful option. And you may not have a direct person to learn from. You learn and make a lot of mistakes on your own. But I think there's a lot of value there too. And if you're young and you believe in the company, I don't see why not to take it. But I think there's value in taking both paths.
I'm gonna just add on to that. I think it depends personally on what you're looking for. If you don't really have a crystal clear idea, like I'm really passionate about biz dev, I think erring on the side of starting a little bit earlier gives you that broad exposure and really helps you. Like, I had no idea. I never, paid acquisition was like the farthest thing from my brain, and I ended up, sort of morphing into that role through a trajectory that I never would have imagined going in. But if you have a really specific role in mind, I think what they said about finding a mentor, being the second hire in a function of the company is really key. One pro tip specific to acquisition. Right now there are a lot of companies in New York who are looking for their first acquisition hire, and there's kind of a shortage of people that have been trained in acquisition. And so I think if that's a role that interests you, I think starting a little bit earlier, not being someone's first hire, is more viable than probably someone else.
This is phenomenal. This conversation here, all the meetups in the city. What is your love in New York? Somewhere else? How do you
Where are you?
well, now I'm in New York. I was in Florida for 4 years.
Personally, like, go to New York or San Francisco for a few weeks. Like, sleep on people's couches. Like, no, I mean, seriously, like, go to all the events, sleep on people's couches, or do Airbnb or something like that. and figure out a way to like stay in one of these hubs for a little while, and meeting up with people that, you know, maybe you're not fully, you know, you also have to be like personable and like go up to people and just say hi and start a conversation. I mean, but you have to go to this business for a little bit. But the other thing is just the internet. You know, start commenting on Fred Wilson's blog, start commenting on Scott's blog. Be active on Twitter. You know, be active on emerging platforms that you know that are just getting popular. You know, like Vine. I don't know, or Insta video or whatever. That's all the same. But like get active on these things and really meet people. So I would say like that's the. I go to very few events like in New York now because I've been here for a while. I've been in Texas for like 5 years, so I know a lot of people. And anyone who's coming in, like I can sort of meet them. But I scale my digital identity like crazy. I write 4 posts a week. I'm very well. They're short. They're like 3 paragraphs. I write them all in like 2 hours, 1 second. But anyway, like be active online. That's the easiest way to like if you're not. So.
I think you can basically be incredibly active online and then like leverage that to get people offline. And so like I've had friends that live in like Wichita, Kansas or something, but they've been like commenting and emailing with these bloggers, and what they'll do is they'll come to New York and they'll meet like 10 people that they really want to meet like in 4 days. And it's just like a super effective strategy, and all those people want to meet with them because they've been cultivating that relationship online for such a long time.
Okay, we have more questions.
All of you emphasize the importance of mentors, and both in your previous positions as well as your current roles. How would you recommend people to foster mentorships, especially if you're in another industry you want to get into
I think the biggest thing is you need to have a clear ask of the mentor. I wouldn't just go to someone and be like, hey, superstar in the startup scene, can you mentor me? But I just think having a very clear ask of them and make sure that they're somewhat relevant to what you want to do, because then they'll be interested in knowing. So I think just be very specific, have a very clear ask, and do some work beforehand. Maybe write them an email why you want to be mentored by them. They've written some blog posts that you really like, or they did something that you really enjoyed. I think that's important. Play to their resources. People like to give other people advice, so I think you can play to that. I think that's helping build a relationship.
I think you want to break to what Scott was saying earlier, the more value you can provide to them. So if you're reaching out to someone who's like a founder of a food site, you're really passionate about food, sharing, hey, you're like 3 things that I love about your site and 3 things that are really problematic to me as a user, and to fix them. That immediately, like Scott was saying, creates a sense of like, okay, cool, this person like put in the time to help me. Even if they weren't dead on, they would put in that time.
I think mentorship takes a long time to get. To be quite frank, if somebody sent me one email and asked if they could be mentored by me, I'd be like, no. So I think like it's a really long time of give and take, and the best thing that you can do is like the biggest. So like how many people here have went to an event and met somebody cool and been like super jacked up that person was like they met and they're gonna be part of their life, and like went to like talk to them 6 months later or email them like shit, they probably forgot who it was. Like that's happened to me a ton. And essentially what's missing there is consistency. And for mentorship, it's the same exact thing that's taking somebody who's from an acquaintance to a trusted friend, colleague, or mentee or mentor. It's just consistency, and every time that you're interacting with somebody, you're providing value to them. And then eventually, like you provided enough value for that person that they're now going to give you value. And then once you establish this give and take relationship, then that's kind of where like the mentorship wheels kick into play. But like if somebody doesn't work at your company, like people that are my mentors now, like that was like an 8-month process to really like get somebody who had just no relation to me to eventually be somebody that would like have a regular get together with me. He would always respond to my email, whatever it was. So I think, you know, my personal viewpoint is that it's a very like slow growth type of thing to pursue.
So the more you have in common with the person at the beginning, the more that growth can be accelerated. So if it's like 8 months for most people, if it's like we went to college or like, you know, we share that we come from the same place, like that can really sort of accelerate it because people feel like they know each other based on that commonality, even if it's pretty superficial.
I'd also say don't ask someone if they can be your mentor. It's really awkward. Don't say those words, and then mentorship happens. Like you'll know it. Like you'll be sitting down with them on a regular basis, whether it's every month or 2 weeks, whatever, and you'll be asking for advice. You'll be telling them what's better. But yeah, like, you ask someone to be your mentor. It's weird.
Especially for those of you who have like corporate experience, especially in finance, and also working in finance, you know, the hours are pretty rough at times. How can we navigate looking for a role in a startup or in a startup while maintaining your current job?
A lot of doctor's appointments. I would say, you know, a lot of the social stuff, you could, like, I was like, you know, I would get as much stuff on your phone as you possibly can. So, like, all of the sort of lighter weight social stuff that we were talking about earlier, like, you don't need to be writing, you know, 5-page-long blog posts, like, just retweeting stuff that, like, is an interesting article, really cool that Facebook is launching this product, but I think it's not as interesting as mine. You know, whatever it is, doing this lighter weight things definitely helps. Taking advantage of the downtime in my earlier job, I had a role where I was like often giving like presentations or materials to senior people, and then like, you know, they'd be like, have it on my desk by noon, and then I'd get it back at like 6 o'clock, and in the meantime I would have like some downtime. And I do a lot of the sort of research and reading that Alex was talking about earlier in that time, and then, you know, like write drafts of emails on paper and then send them later to my personal account. And then once you get to the interviewing stage, that's a little bit trickier, but generally speaking, especially if it's a little bit earlier, like, you know, someone's like, hey, can you come to the interview at 2 if you're, you know, really crazy hours and really want to meet with you, but, you know, is it okay if you do it on a Saturday or like at 7 at night instead of, you know, 3 in the afternoon? People are generally pretty flexible about that.
One more question. There's a game 7 in like 10 minutes. Who's been raising their hand a lot, to be honest?
Choosing to go work for a startup as opposed to a established company is a pretty risky proposition. What was the process you went through when you said go to your company that gave you comfort that this was the one, this is a place that I could be at, or whatever your right the time horizon was?
I can take that. When I first started at Goldman in New York, about a week later, Lehman Brothers failed, and any illusions that I had of a ton of security in any job honestly kind of shattered in that moment. And that was actually part of what kicked off my journey into looking way more seriously at tech than I had before. It was sort of like, okay, this thing that I thought was like this 100-year-old plus institution was just like collapse. You know, I'm not afraid that I'm going to go to another company, you know, it's going to fail, and it's kind of crazy when you actually step back. I think for me, in terms of Howaboutview specifically, much more, I think, than big companies, startups really reflect the personalities of the founders, and I love the founder of Amronski. They were really unconventional. They were like teachers before they started the company, but I sensed in them a common alignment of values. They were really passionate about learning. They were really passionate about going big or going home. They were thoughtful. You could tell that they like that they were really going to like kill themselves to make this work, and that really enjoyed that.
You know, when I was at Citigroup as well, I joined right when the financial crisis started. Our stock was at $54. I came to work the next day, it was at 97 cents. So, I mean, it happens everywhere. There's risk everywhere. But I think, you know, when you're looking at startups, things that I care about, people may have different opinion, but the number one thing for me is kind of what Kay was saying, the founders and the culture that they're building there, I think are extremely important, because you're gonna be there in the trenches with these people for, 18 hours a day. You need to, one, love the people you work with, you need to really enjoy the culture and the environment, and I think you need to obviously believe in the idea. There's no guarantees. You could join a startup, it could be doing well, and then all of a sudden it could blow up, and the market may shrink, and then loses funding, and then you're out of a job. But I think, you need to kind of just figure out how risk averse you are, and if you're more risk averse, then join a later stage startup that has more funding, and that's more stable and the product's already scaling. Or if you really want to take risk, join something really early stage or start your own thing. It really just depends on where you are in the spectrum.
I ended off by saying that, you may think that it's riskier to go to a startup, but actually, if you think about like how many personal layoffs there are in big corporations, you just really never know. Whereas a startup, you have a better grasp of where things are actually. You know how much money, you should know how much, one of the questions you should ask is how much money you have, how much time you have. You can pretty much tell if the management is competent or not, for the most part. So I think it's actually less risky to go to a startup than it is to a big corporation. Yes.
Hi everybody, I'm Michelle Middle. As Justin said earlier, I'm the other co-founder of Silicon Valley. I worked at Garland for the last 6 years because I also started in 2007, and we almost did go under. So that was an interesting experience, and I quit March 8th of this year after spending about a year doing everything these guys basically were just talking about. And now I work at a really small early stage startup out of GA here, so I literally work on my house today. So I am willing to see the fact that all this stuff actually does work if you want it bad enough. So that being said, 3 quick things. Number one, thank you very much to our panelists. For moderating. And since I've taken this job, I've been not able to help nearly as much with this stuff, so thank you to Justin for doing most of it. Second thing is that one of the other things we started as part of Silicon Valley, simply because there are all these meetups in the city, there are all these Skillshare and GA classes, which are wonderful. And another thing that I used to do when I was still at Merrill, I literally would take my iPad and go sit in meeting rooms with like a Wi-Fi hotspot and watch the live streams of GA classes during the day. So if you can somehow manage that, that's another workaround as well. So there are all these classes, all these meetups, but one of the things that's really hard to do is actually connect with people and see what they're building and how they're building it, what it actually looks like to work for one of these startups. And so what we've done is we've started a user testing platform, which basically means you can go to our site and fill out a form and talk about what companies you might be interested in meeting, and we will match you with a founder that will basically, you will give them user testing, which basically means you'll use their product, you'll watch you use it, and you'll give them feedback so that they can improve upon their development process, and you get to spend an hour with a founder and understand what it means to actually build something. And so far it's been really successful for a lot of people, so if you're interested, you can go to our site and sign up. And the last thing is there's somebody here, Rupa, who is developing a product that I think some of you might be interested in. So.
Thanks so much. Hi, I'm Rupa Parekh. I was a SUE who transitioned to the tech scene a couple of years ago. I have a background in capital management. I've worked in tech in New York. Probably something I did every week in the last couple of startups is hire. I felt like I hired and recruited people every day. So my co-founder and I were building a portfolio tool that is designed specifically for you, for business professionals who are career switchers, and who need to communicate to employers who are hard-pressed for time how exactly you're going to contribute value. Because you are all so talented, you're so smart, your LinkedIn profiles and your resumes are stellar and they're perfect, but I'm sure that all of us, at the end of the day, just want to know what are you going to do for me. And so between projects that you might work on to help people user test or different consulting projects you might do, we think that for people like us, sometimes a WordPress theme or a Wix page doesn't quite cut it. So we're designing something that helps you really show what you can do with your skills. So if you're interested, follow up with me. You guys are great. I
Could you just tell
It's
us
called
what?
How I Work. This is how I work.co. So maybe I can send out an email.
This is
Yeah,
how I work.
we're gonna include the link to that in our follow-up.
Yeah, it's called This is How I Work.